I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. Why choose real estate as your vehicle for financial freedom? It can teach you a lesson, as you know, along the way. And it is an amazing asset to invest in, and it will compound and it will reward you well, but it does require work and focus for you to get that. So why real estate?
Absolutely. So real estate kind of happened to me in a way. I was in a relationship in my early 20s, and my ex's parents encouraged us to buy our first house together. And I didn't realize at the time that it was going to change the trajectory of my life forever. And so at 21, I bought my first property and immediately started renting out the extra room off and on when people wanted to come through town or there was an opportunity to do that. So, really, from the start in 2014, I started renting out my property at times. And then in 2018, I moved part time to California and rented my house out in Tennessee completely, and immediately realized that I loved having a rental property. That thing was a cash cow. My mortgage was $900 a month, and the rent on the property was $2,400. So really good upside considering I'd only owned the property for less than 4 years. And then I was still working in Tennessee. So I was going back and forth from LA to Nashville and needed a spot. And I was like, oh, well, maybe the bank will give me some more money. So I looked at some properties. I found a really cool duplex in East Nashville and just kind of like reached out to my bank and was like, could I have a loan maybe? And they said yes immediately. And I didn't believe them. And I was like, really? And so I put 3% or 3.5% down, got an FHA loan on that property. It was my primary residence. And I lived in the smaller unit, rented out the bigger one, and found that I just like loved all things rental properties. And I just, had the 3 units, one of which I was living in and then 2 that I was renting, and loved it. And unfortunately, the first house that I owned actually had a house fire. My tenant threw a lit cigarette on the back porch in the middle of August on top of some Amazon boxes. And I got a call at 6 in the morning that she was okay, thank God, but the house was in pretty bad shape. And it was obviously devastating and really shocking, and dealing with the ins and outs of like insurance claims and all of that, what is a really stressful situation. I found that I loved solving the problem. And in any career, in any job, there's going to be things that go wrong. There's going to be mistakes that are made or issues to solve, or just like kind of logistics. And I found that I loved doing that within real estate. I had been a wedding planner for years. I'd worked in accounting. I'd actually managed a developer and investors accounting side for years. I'd worked in financial education. I had a really varied work experience. And I found that when anything went wrong in any of those jobs, it felt stressful. But when something went wrong in real estate, I found it to be a fascinating problem to solve and puzzle to solve rather than a stressful thing in my body. And so as I realized that, I thought, maybe there's something here, and kind of went with it.
All right, great. And now you own a couple. I know you own some more doors than you do. You own
Yeah.
more than 3 at this moment.
hmm
So, what point did you become financially free? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know in my story I was just replacing a teacher's salary, so that helped me get financially free faster because the salary I was replacing was actually less, right? So, at what point did you become financially free?
Yeah. So it happened, slowly and all at once. I didn't at all expect to be financially free when I left my last job. It was that toward the end of 2022, interest rates were starting to rise. I'd been working in sales at a title and escrow company, and so I was working within the real estate industry. And interest rates were rising, and my company did a round of layoffs. And I was living in far Northern California at the time, and everybody knew that I wanted to move back down to Southern California. And there was a job position open for my company to be the Southern California sales rep for the title and escrow company. And with the layoff starting, they restructured the company and they made my sales manager the new sales rep for LA. And I knew that when they took that position and they gave it to my old manager, that I was no longer up for that position. And of course, I wanted him to have it. He was phenomenal. And I'm glad that they kept his job. But I then called my new manager since they'd restructured the company. And I said, hey, I know we're doing more layoffs. I know interest rates are rising. I know that I'm not going to get the job in LA. So next time you do a round of layoffs, if you have to choose someone in one of the categories that I'm in, pick me.
Okay.
And 2 weeks later, I got the call from my manager and she said, "We picked you."
So now that you have time and financial freedom and you've been able to have the freedom to do personal growth work, how has all of this shifted you and who you are and how you want to live your life?
Yeah, I think it's all happened so, like, subtly and beautifully over time. Like, one thing that I'll say is that I had this vision when I was, getting divorced when I was 27. I felt like my entire life had fallen apart, and this was before I had reached the time and location freedom. But I had this vision of myself just crying on the floor and feeling really, empty and lonely, and like everything had fallen out from under me. And I was in this dimly lit room with wide wood plank flooring, and you could see little patches of light that were coming through the ceiling. And suddenly, this pane of glass just shattered over the top of my head as I was lying on the floor crying. And so now, not only am I lying on the floor crying that my life is over, but now I'm surrounded by these broken pieces of glass. And in this vision, I slowly sat up and I picked up a piece of glass and I held it to the light. And that glass had represented my life and what it had been, and it was now shattered. And as I held that piece up to the glass, I realized that I still had access to all of the pieces of my life. And now I had the opportunity to thoughtfully and artfully curate a mosaic that represented what I wanted my life to look like going forward. And so in the past 6 years, I have done that. And so the personal development work has been integral to that. I've gone to therapy. I've worked with intuitive healers. I now have my yoga certification. I practice yoga, meditate, and really spend a lot of time in conversation with people that inspire me. I find that to be the most grounding and profound thing that I can do is be in community with other people who are seeking becoming the best version of themselves and finding peace and joy and fulfillment within their everyday lives. Because joy and happiness is not out there. Joy, happiness, peace is right in here. And it doesn't matter what the external circumstances are when we feel good on the inside, then everything else on the outside will change and reflect that, which we already all know that we are.
You're making me cry. That's so good. It's such a great story, and that's part of why I wanted to bring this story. So a sneak peek for you listeners. So Amanda has been hired on at Christina Suter Consulting because of the amazing background that she brings in her personal growth work and in her heart and in her kindness and her awareness of time and location freedom and what that means to young people today and how you can craft a life even in your 30s that allows you that sense of freedom and joy now versus waiting for this concept of a retirement portfolio that's been crafted. Like, no, let's do that sooner than later. And you're a living example of what it means. That the story of, creating the mosaic out of the broken pieces of glass is a perfect example, because how many of us can relate to a moment in our lives where we felt like our life had shattered and we would never have what we thought we were going to have. And then what do we choose to craft out of that? And, that's the work that we try to do with the clients that we have. How do we take somebody who feels their portfolio isn't performing, or they're cornered, or they're stuck in a job, or their, portfolio isn't giving them the freedom they want? And how do we craft them to help them create that mosaic for themselves? And I just
So excited to have Amanda on board because of the value that you bring, your depth,
Thank you.
empathy, and real estate knowledge.